Iglesia, Church, welcome. This is session number 3 of our series, Summary of Christian Doctrine. Is the second part of the doctrine of God and creation. We are using the book of Louis Berkhof with the same title, Summary of Christian Doctrine. This will be the second part to conclude that portion, the first section called the Doctrine of God and creation. But before we go into more details, let me thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your investment of time. If you're here, it means that you want to become an official member of Christos Community, or you want to, or you're exploring that internal call to become an officer at Christos, a ruling elder or a deacon. Thank you so much either way. If you're here for any other reason, also, I want to welcome you and thank you. Investment of time is one of the most difficult things that we can do nowadays. So for the next few minutes, for your investment of those minutes, I thank you. So what we're gonna what we're gonna cover, and again making reference to the book of Mr. Berkhof, we're gonna be covering chapters 8, 9, and 10. We're gonna talk about God's decrees. How is that He makes those decrees come to pass, which is through His work of creation and providence. So let us begin with the divine decrees. Some theologians will argue with us, and Mr. Berkhof will present that idea also, that we should talk only about one decree, one order, one plan, one will of God, not several, not diverse, many, because God's plan is perfect, because He's holy, He doesn't make mistakes, so there is a need for only one decree. Me personally, I'm not offended by the plural of the word. Actually, it makes it easier to process it when I can see that God plan has different components, different elements. Maybe I'm looking at more from an engineering point of view, a project management point of view. So I'm okay. The divine decrees, I have no problem whatsoever in saying that. I know that all these decrees work in unison and with one purpose. But even here, Mr. Berkhof will talk about the different components of God decrees, and he will group them into categories, or he will have two components: the permissive decrees and the perfect decrees, or the permissive component and the perfect component. The permissive component in God's decrees is that element of His plan that allows us, creation, to make decisions, to go according to our will, according to our free moral actions, never autonomous from God, and that's a big difference between being autonomous and being free, but under His permissive elements, or under His permissive decrees, God allows things to happen. The way I understand it, the way it makes sense to me, is that this reflects the permissive decrees often reflects God's desire. For instance, God has the desire that everyone will come to the knowledge of His saving grace. At the same time, we know that that's not going to happen, that some members of the human race will be rebellious against God until He comes again, and they are destined for the eternal fires of hell. But that is not pleasing to God. Even the Bible very clearly says that God does not find pleasure in the destruction of the wicked. But He allows things to happen. It's not that of course, there are things that happen that is not pleasing to God. In that regard, our actions, our sin against others, this, of course, they're not pleasing to God, but they're also part or under this section of his decrees, which is the permissive. The perfect decrees are God's orders, commands that he said this is going to happen, and that's what happened. This is how things are going to work, and there's no questions about it. There's nothing that will prevent that to take place. Here in the section of the divine decrees, Mr. Berkhof also talks about, okay, so where are these decrees coming from, or why is that God decides certain things to happen? And I will summarize it saying that the foundation of his decrees is God's character. This means that God is not going around asking for opinion. He is not hiring a consulting firm to find the best way to do things. He is not he's not issuing his decrees based on popularity or trends. The only foundation of his decrees is God himself. So we can say that his decrees are perfect, holy, unmutable, generous, because that's the way God is. So the foundation of those decrees is God's character. Now, of course, there are some objections to his decrees or to this doctrine. When we say that God has ordained everything that will come to pass, that he has established everything, and say this is what's going to happen, even if we consider the permissive components of his decrees, there are objections, and we can again categorize them or put them together in these three different categories or groups. The first objection is that it goes against my freedom. It goes against free will. And this is an interesting debate, and we can talk about it deeply or deeper, in a deeper way, in another setting. But no, it doesn't. Don't forget, there is a component that is permissive in his decrees, and that allows for, in this case, human decisions and interventions and things to happen. Never autonomous, and I'm going to emphasize that, never autonomous from his decrees and plans and will, but it is us who is acting. It is us. These are our decisions, and we are responsible. We are responsible. In a few moments here, we're going to talk about how much freedom we really have, but his decrees do not violate that freedom. Second objection of second category is that then, if he has already ordained everything, what's the point of evangelism? Why should I be concerned about seeking my own salvation or seeking the salvation of others if he has already decided everything? Lo que será, será. This objection ignores a few things that we know from the Bible. The first one is that God commands his people to go and preach the gospel and make disciples among the nations. That is a commandment. It is right there. We are commissioned to do that. But also, it ignores the fact that I don't know who's going to be saved. Since I have received mercy, I should be moved to compassion, and I should be moved to give mercy. The fact that I don't know who's going to be saved should be a motivation for me to go to the ends of the earth, preach the gospel, and desire to see God's salvation coming to every and any kind of people. That there's no one person, one type of individuals that is too far from his salvation. All this should come as a motivation instead of a deterrent in seeking salvation. And then the third objection is that, well, then God made me do it, right? If I sin, it's not me, it's God. He ordained it. Go and talk to him. Don't sue me. And again, this objection ignores the fact that part of his decrees are permissive, which allows for human agency, human actions, and we are the ones that are responsible. God works through secondary causes, but we are the ones that are responsible and it's not God. Talking about God's decree, we cannot avoid God's decrees. We cannot avoid talking about predestination, which is one of the things we are more famous for. We Reformed Presbyterian Christians. And believe it or not, it is probably, even when it's controversial and difficult, my opinion is one issue that is very easy to defend and present, because we do actually have the word predestination in the Bible. God has predestined us before the foundation of the earth. Before time started, He predestined us. In love, He predestined us. So, it again, it's an easy debate, or easier compared to the others. And when we talk about predestination, we need to consider, as Mr. Berkhof would like us to remember, that God's predestination includes those that are predestined for election, meaning those who are going to be saved, and for reprobation, meaning those who are not going to be saved. It has these two sides, and I know it's difficult. It's difficult and sad, just to think that people will end up in hell. What we need to remember, though, is the reason they're there, and it's their own doing, is their own decision, it is their own actions. I know it sounds unfair, but as one famous theologian, that will be Dr. R.C. Sproul, he said once that some people will receive God's grace and mercy, some others will receive God's justice, but no one will receive injustice. And for that, we need to consider this when we talk about this topic, this particular topic, that it is our own doing. The reason we are slaves to sin is our own doing. Nobody forces us to do it. We don't know the reasons why our forefathers did it, but we know how they did it. We don't know exactly what went through their minds and hearts, but we know that pride took root and idolatry came, and boom, Adam and Eve fell. And we fell with them. So it's our own doing and making. We need to consider this, that our so-called freedom, quotes, is really stained and limited by our own sin. Some people, some scholars have said that, yes, we are free. We are free to choose how to offend God, how to sin against our neighbor. That's our freedom. And that we are not autonomous, for reasons we will talk about in a minute. But that's what we need to consider. We need to consider this reality, that even if God had decided to save no one, that will be fair. God will still be holy and just. But it's because of His mercy that He decided to save some. Here we have a more formal language to answer what are the decrees of God. This is coming from the Westminster Shorter Catechism. This is the answer to question number 7. On the right of the screen, you will see a few passages that support what is being said on the left. So I'm going to challenge you to visit those passages and see how they relate to the answer that is being given here. You need to look at Psalm 33:11, read it, understand it, and see how Psalm 33:11 support what part of this answer. How does this psalm relate to what is being said here as the answer to question 7 of the Westminster Shorter Catechism? Now, moving to creation. And in the Catechism, you will read there's a question about how is that God, and I'm paraphrasing, how is that God makes His decrees come to pass? And the answer is through His work of creation and providence. And both creation and providence. Talking about creation, these are the 4 important things that Berkhof mentioned. The first one is that God created completely out of nothing, that he spoke and things came to be. There was nothing before. That is a huge, very important distinction. We are not saying that God created the universe based on something that was there before. Nope, there was nothing. God spoke, and because the triune God of the universe is that powerful, because he is the Lord and King, things came to be. Ex nihilo, out of nothing. Only God can do that. Only Jehovah can do this. He created the universe not out of any particular need. God was not in eternity past, bored to death, not knowing what to do, and all of a sudden he said, you know what? Let's create the universe. Nope. God was in no need whatsoever of this creation. He didn't create it because it's not that he was seeking something or somebody to worship him, to make him feel better, to boost his self-esteem. It's not like that. So there was no need for him to do it. Creation is, even today, still completely dependent on God's goodness. We still depend on him to keep on going. That nuclear furnace that comes up every morning and go down in the evening, that we call the sun, that furnace, it's running because God sustains the reactions that are taking place there. It is God who keeps the order of the universe ordered. He's the one that sustains you and me. This universe, this creation still depends completely on the Creator. And God did not only created the physical world, the physical universe, this order, God also created the spiritual realm, which is a reality. It does exist. It's there. So God is the creator of man, angels, demons, Satan himself. We all share this, that we are creation, that we are not, none of us, including Satan, none of us is autonomous. We can do whatever we want to do completely apart from the Creator. That is not true. God is Lord, King, Master of the smallest particle of the universe. There is no one single square inch on this universe and in the spiritual realm over which God is not king, over which he is not saying that it's mine. Now, of course, we humans, we are pretty industrious, right? And clever, and we have too much time in our hands, and we come with alternatives. We say, well, nah, I look at the universe, and that sounds like a nice theory, Alex, what you just say, what the Bible say, but let me tell you, I can come with my own. So we have these alternatives and quote unquote, air quotes, at least three alternatives to the doctrine of creation. The first one, the universe always existed. And Dr. Carl Sagan, the cosmologist for Cornell University, he is famous for his series Cosmos. And in one of those episodes, he actually made this comment when he's talking about creation. And he said, well, some people say that God created the universe. If that's the case, and of course I'm paraphrasing, if that's the case, who created God? That's a fair question. I don't think it's a fair question. Actually, it's a very less intelligent question. And then he continues, if we say that God always existed, cannot we say that the universe always existed? If we say that there was no beginning for God, can't we say that then there was no beginning for the universe? These fallacies are indications of problems with Dr. Sagan's logic, but we can get more detail in another occasion. But no, no, the universe not always existed. It is the Lord who has always existed and who will always exist, and the one who created this universe. Then we have the idea of everything is God. Every component of the universe is God Himself. That rock right there, that flower that I'm seeing through that window right there, me, you, we all have this divine line within. This is the pantheistic view, and it's not true. No, there's a distinction. There's a difference between the creator and the creation. So God is not the universe. And then we have evolution, came in vogue when the second half of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, this idea got some traction, which we're talking about creation here, and people talk about evolution. It shows that no, evolution implies that there was a beginning, something evolved, something more complex evolved from something simpler, but the question remains. Evolution is not addressing that question. Where did that simpler element thing came from? That primal cosmic soup is not a primal biochemical soup, organic soup, where everything came from, where that soup came from. Again, quoting Dr. Carl Sagan on Cosmos, which is very interesting, right? Because we know the laws of thermodynamics, and we know that we have never seen a more complex system coming from a simpler system, right? We know the laws of thermodynamics. We know that entropy tends to increase when you don't intervene in the system. If I remember correctly, we call that a closed system. And if you'll just leave it alone, every system will decompose, will break down into simpler versions or components of itself. We have never seen it in the other way around. And yet, biologists insist that evolution means that we can see more complex systems coming from simpler, which, again, that's also for another discussion. But so these are the three alternatives, all of them with their own errors. What about the days of creation? It's really 24 hours. And Mr. Berkhof makes a very interesting point here, and I don't think he debates deeply. Is it 24 hours, or are these epochs, are these seasons, are these many, many millions of years? He makes an interesting comparison between day 1 and day 4, day 2 against day 5, and day 3 against day 6 of creation, which is very interesting, and brings my point here. Two things here, and these are my opinion. First, that God creates with appearance of age. And by appearance, it looks like age, and it is age. What I mean by this is, beloved, God created Adam and Eve as complete functional human beings of certain age. He didn't create a baby that grew into being a teenager or an adult later. So God can create with that appearance of age, and that it took time, but it didn't. He created boom right away, which is the answer to the question, where came first, the chicken or the egg? We know it was the chicken. And also, I think that we need to consider creation in the context of the whole Bible. We don't have the account of creation, which is real, is historical. It really happened like that. We don't have that account so that we may learn something about the Big Bang, something about cosmology, something about physics. No. Are those topics included in the Bible? Maybe we can make a point, but that is not what the Bible is concerned about. The Bible is concerned about telling us who is God, telling us about His character, telling us about our condition, which is sin, and telling us about what God is doing to solve that problem. So that's what the Bible is about. Every now and then, it will use the Bible. We'll talk about other topics, but all of them are subscribed to this big narrative that we call redemptive history. So we need to consider that. We need to consider why there were 6 days and why they are, my opinion, 24-hour days. Why what happened in the seventh? Why is and all the idea of a rest, a day of rest? So, and why is number 8 important? Anyway, that's for another discussion. So I do believe personally there were 24-hour days, and the bigger discussion is this: that we need to consider this account of creation. Whatever conclusion we may reach in terms of 24 hours or not, we need to consider it within the context of God's work of redemption. Question number 8, the answer, you can see it right here. And again, you see the text on the left and on the right, a few verses that support different parts of that answer. Please take a note. Go and visit those passages, pause the video, study them, read them. You can always go back to, if you have the book at the end of each chapter, at the end of every very short chapter, you can find some suggestions for deeper study, some questions, comments, passages that you can visit. If you have the book, I'm going to challenge you to do that. But if you don't, and even if you do, please consider these other texts of the Bible that support these answers. Now, to conclude, let's talk about providence. Beautiful word, providence. And we all know the capital of Rhode Island. And it's interesting to me how years ago in the mid-1800s, Providence, I think people were more aware of their dependency on God's goodness and intervention, to the point that Providence was a way more popular word, according to Google, back then than nowadays. And even to the point also that people will use it interchangeably to make reference to God. Instead of saying God willing, they will say if Providence allows it, capital P, to make reference to God. Providence, Mr. Louis Berkhof will tell us, have 3 components: divine preservation, concurrence, and government. Preservation is God's involvement in his creation so that things continue to be upheld, continue to be sustained. This is that continuous work of God by which he upholds all things. Concurrence, Mr. Berkhof, defined it like this: this may be defined as that work of God by which he cooperates with all his creatures and causes them to act precisely as they do. And then government, this is the continued activity of God whereby he rules all things so that they answer to their purpose of their existence. And this is the 3 components of providence. And so what we see is that God ordained things. He said, this is the plan, this is going to happen. Then God creates everything that needs to be created so that will happen. And here in providence, we see how he intervenes. Sometimes God intervenes in even going against the laws that he has established for the created order. We call that miracles. What we need to remember, and they are real, yes. And what we need to remember about miracles is that the miracles are signs that confirm God's plan. Miracles are not for our entertainment. Miracles are not for our enrichment in terms of money. No, miracles take place so that God may receive the glory. Yes, sometimes they do happen. Sometimes God in his providence decides to do a miracle. Always within that context of affirming who God is, what he's doing, and our condition. In other words, they will never go against Scripture. They are not for our entertainment, but the affirmation of his honor. Um, this doctrine also is under attack in different fronts, but all these different fronts, and this is my summary, my own um, resumen, is that all these different attacks always question God's presence among us, and always question how active He is or not, especially in the small stuff of life. Now that I'm reading here on the screen, maybe the word much should not be there, but hey, what are you going to do? Version 2.0 will have, well, actually 1.5. Well, I will correct that, but I think that's the question always: is God really here? They doubt that God is here, and they doubt the attacks on providence. They doubt that God is involved with the small stuff of life. Let me tell you, He is here. The Lord is Jehovah, the great I am, and at the same time, He is Emmanuel, God with us. And He is concerned, involved even in the smallest elements of life, because there is really not small elements of life. All of them, all of life matter. It does. And He is Lord over everything. So He is the one that cannot be contained by creation, and at the same time, the one who became flesh like you and me, that we may see His glory. It is for our benefit, for His glory, but for benefit, for His honor, but for our blessing, that He became flesh. The second person of the Holy Trinity took our nature without sin to demonstrate that He is Jehovah and Emmanuel. He is here, and He is interested in the small stuff of daily life. To conclude, here you have the answer to question 11. A few more passages, and again, I challenge you, go and read them, go and find them, and see how they relate to the question, the answer that is given here. Try to find out how Psalm 145, verse 17, supports this answer, what part of this answer is being supported by Psalm 145, and then go down the list and do it. Please. Familia, thank you so very much. We have concluded this short video. I'm not looking at the timer. I cannot see, but I'm assuming it's only like 7 minutes long, I'm sure. So thank you so much. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He have mercy on you and your family. Shall you have any question, shall you have any doubts, comments, suggestions, anything, please let me know. Okay? Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.